Hello and welcome to the Mindful Messenger Show. My name is Amanda Johnson and I jumped at the invitation to host a show about something I'm really passionate about, mindful messaging. What is that? Well, for more than a decade, I've been working with aspiring authors, speakers, coaches, and messengers of all kinds to share their messages powerfully on pages and stages. And I've realized as we all set out on our messenger journey, we come face to face with two realities. The first is that we're pretty darn awesome at what we do, very masterful. And the second is we're also messy humans who have to revise some stories in order to reach our dreams and do what we see is possible for us. So how do we move forward with these kind of paradoxical realities? So journeying with these messengers, I've had long conversations about what it takes to help others with our message and also to stay honest with ourselves and our continually developing stories. So this show is your opportunity to eavesdrop on some of those conversations. What does it look like to be mindful? What does it take to actually be mindful while we are, writing, creating, speaking, and doing all other things mindfully? So today I'm really excited to share Alisa Griffis with you, Dr. Alisa Griffis. Alisa was one of my mentors for years and is still a person that I call often because she has worked in education for more than 20 years, teaching children and adults the processes of critical thinking, writing, and connection to others. She's been motivating others to grow to meet their goals and dreams, and it's one of her favorite areas of her mission. She's currently teaching at 2 universities and evaluates student-teacher portfolios and teachers' work in Master's in Education program at Western Governors University. She's also written several published books: The Power of Three, Managing Life in a Hectic World; Conundrums, a book that helps parents teach critical thinking to their kids in a fun way; a textbook on ESL assessment; and a book on teaching the writing process to children in grades 3 through 6. She's also written Gonals. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, good. A preteen fiction story about a genetically engineered pet that gets out of a lab and finds a young boy to protect. So welcome, Alisa.
Welcome. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see you.
I know, we don't get to hang out very often. It's kind of fun to do this. So what people always hear me say is when I start to share my story is I talk about this mentor that I was working with and this amazing book that I was working on, and how this mentor said, "You should write a book someday." And I was like, oh, petrified, because I was at the time so disconnected from my purpose and my message and what I wanted to do in the world. And that person was you. You were the person who asked me, "What do you have to give today?" So first of all, thank you for asking a powerful question that catalyzed that journey.
That's sweet. It makes me cry. No.
I'm glad, because what do we know? You're like one of the best educators I've ever met. So we know the power of asking the right question at the right time, like possibilities emerge. So,
yes. I think that it's seeing the right potential in the right person.
Yes.
So, I mean, when you started working with me, I was like, oh my goodness, she's one of the most brilliant people I have ever met, if not the most brilliant person I have ever met. And what are you doing to share that brilliance? It was fun to be there at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because, it's funny because I remember you saying things like that to me, and I still remember the response of, like, are you kidding me? Because I had seen you in classrooms and I had seen the curriculum that you'd written. I thought, wow, what an honor to be thought to be brilliant by this woman. And also how, what happens as people begin to reflect that back to us, and they begin to reflect back our mastery and all the stories that come up to say, well, okay, I'm good at that, but also like over here, it's kind of messy. So that whole process just really catalyzed an amazing journey for me, and I'm just so grateful. But I don't want to talk about my journey. I just want people to understand our connection. I want to talk about you and, when and where you were the first time you thought, like, I have this really precious thing, this message or this skill that I want to offer to the world. Where were you when that happened for you?
Isn't that interesting? Because my mom had been telling me that I should be a teacher since I was young. And I told her no, that I was going to be a something else, anything but that. And when I was, let me think, 34 years old, and I found myself suddenly a divorced mom, and I needed to get on my feet, I was pushed kicking and screaming into the educational world, because at least I would have the same schedule as my children, so that I would be able to be with them when they were out of school. And I had enough experiences in their own classrooms, working with their teachers and volunteering, that I knew that I enjoyed it, but I had no idea that it would be magic. So I got my teaching credential at the University of Redlands, started in my classroom, which was a 4th grade classroom of inner city children in San Bernardino, 34 kids, no parents, no help, no aides, nothing. And that first day, I see all these little kids looking at me, and I was like, yes! And that was that. And that was that. Yeah. So, I mean, what an experience and what a ride. And just day before yesterday, I got to speak with one of my kids from that first class, Alva. We were chatting. I'm Facebook friends with all my former students now, so I get to see how they're doing in their lives. But she said, you were the first person who ever noticed that I was okay, that I could be okay. I thought that I was stupid, and I had heard that from teachers. She has since gone on to graduate high school as the valedictorian, gone on to graduate college, gone on to be successful in her adult career. She's in her early 30s now. Oy vey, time has flown, hasn't it? And she said, you were the person who said, Alva, you're the best in the class. I said it quietly, at long division. And she said, that moment I went home and I said, Mom, I'm the best in the class at something. And her mom said, that tall blonde teacher, she's really good to you. She remembers that all those years later.
I know, it's those moments that we, it's like the first time someone notices something. I remember that school I was teaching at in Pomona.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Where do we throw the new teachers? Let's throw them in the classes that are
the hardest class possible, right?
And I remember there was this girl who sat in the back of the room, and she was quiet and she was withdrawn, and when she wasn't making a ruckus with her friend next door. And I had done these little happy faces. I created these little happy faces. I would write notes for a few of them every day. And one day, I don't even remember what I wrote, but it was like, I was trying to look for something that everyone was doing right, because people who walked in the room were constantly calling them out for doing all the wrong things. And so I remember I had asked a question, and she had said, she tried to answer it. She really gave it a good effort. And so that's what I said. Thank you for engaging yesterday. You have a lot of good things to say. And I remember that she started crying when she turned over the happy face and read the note. And I was worried that maybe I said something wrong. I said, are you okay? And she goes, this is the first nice thing anyone has ever said to me. And this was a 16-year-old young woman. And I thought, oh my God.
Isn't that terrible? And that it brings me to the thought, I have 2 teaching mottos that I use constantly, and I use them in my everyday life as well. The first one is, do not look just for the gifts of the gifted child. Look for the gifts in every child and in every person. We're not just to be looking for that gifted kid or that gifted individual in one area. Everybody has gifts. And our job is to find those gifts and recognize them and then celebrate them. And then the other teaching motto that I've had, and I carry this through my life as well, is once a student, always a friend. And I meant that. I used to, my students, I told them I would never have an unlisted phone number. They would always be able to find me. And now that there's Facebook, they found me. but it's like, if you need me, I'm always here for you. You're now my friend. I just had to tell a different student, you can stop calling me Dr. Griffis now. I'm like, you're 29 years old. You can call me Alisa. It's okay. We've gone over that bridge of adulthood. It's okay. I set you free.
Please use my first name. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, what the other thing that people don't know is that I worked for you for a few years in a writing instruction company that you created, which was phenomenal. And I had the opportunity to be trained by you and how to, like, this woman is responsible for all of the books that I've written over online instruction with people because I learned how to do it from you. And so I just remember these little gems that you would give me, like, okay, try this and try that. And, one of the things was, I remember you saying about the sandwich method. And it was something that I had heard, I understood intuitively. It was something I was using with my son. But when you're like, this is what this is what you did amazingly well, like 90% cheer and one thing to work on. And so anyone who's worked with me who's watching this knows, like, that's how we roll. Like, this is what you nailed, and this is the one thing we got to work on this next round. And it dramatically changed the results. And I was just telling my husband, I was like, I get to interview Alisa today. And I was telling him about when I went to be in one of your classrooms. I just remember the amount of energy that you would expend to high five a kid who got something very small right. Like, you did a great job with these periods.
Right?
And I just remember watching them sit up straight and walk back to their desk like they owned the place.
Yes.
Over period. And I really believe that that is why you have gotten such amazing results in every single room. I mean, beyond all of the other skills you have, but that connection, that belief in people is...
Our goal is to give people back their dignity.
Yes.
Besides, picky, put down, it wears at the soul. Mm-hmm. So the purpose is to build up somebody so that they can get through that door, so that they can crash through that barrier. I just today wrote to a teacher in a master's program that I'm teaching, and he said, I don't want to lower the bar for my English as a second language students. How do I differentiate instruction so that I'm not lowering the bar? And I said, I'm so glad you asked that question, as I'm typing a million words a minute, This is a paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. We are not talking about lowering a bar and lowering expectations. We want every single student to reach their own personal potential and the top end of their personal potential. Mm-hmm. What we don't want to do is baby somebody who no longer needs babying. Mm-hmm. If it's time to kick that little fledgling out of the nest, then we have to say, you know what, you're capable of more than this. Go back and do it again. You can do that.
Yeah.
But before that moment, we have to know the child. We have to know who they are, or that adult. So for that particular student, who's a full-grown adult and teaching in the classroom, and I don't know him well because the class started last week, but I had to say to him, it's a matter of reaching and teaching. If we don't have their heart first, we're never going to get the academics out of them. Yeah. And you know that too yourself. Mm-hmm. When you're working with somebody who is struggling to write that self-help book or struggling in a particular area of coaching, mm-hmm. until you know who they are as a human being, we can't put in those other educational pieces into place.
Yeah, it's definitely not possible. Mm-hmm. And you did it, I think, at least in that initial schooling, that initial elementary school experience, you did it in a very difficult environment. I mean,
say that again.
You just kind of, glossed over the fact that you had no parent support, no admin support, no, like those things. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I walked away from education, was because I was like, I just did not have the inner resources to meet the need without all of those supports. And so what I want to know is, like, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced with regard to that no support? Like, and how did you navigate those with these kids?
Okay, so it came from thinking outside the box. First of all, and we've all heard this, if anybody's in education, if you're not in education, then you'll know, stay away from the teacher's lunchroom, because it's all that one hears is people complaining and saying negative things. And I felt almost murderous rage.
Yes.
I wanted to slap people, and that's wrong. And so I couldn't change their points of view. I had teachers say to me, "Why are you smiling?" Oh my goodness gracious, because I feel joy. Why else would I not smile? I mean, okay. But so I stayed away from negativity. That was the first step. The second step was, in my second year of teaching, I decided I'd do something different, which is I told all of the students in the first week of school that I wanted to come and visit their families at their homes in whatever iteration of family they had, grandparents, parents, foster parents, one parent, whatever, aunts, uncles, whomever it was. And I said, and all I'm going to do is come and brag on you. I promise I am not going to say anything negative. So if you already feel like you're frightened because you have had bad behavior in the past, I don't see you as that person. I see you as a kid with a gold star right all over you. You're a gold star student to me, so I'm going to go brag on you. And believe me, I'm already seeing you, and I'm already seeing wonderful things that you do. So go tell your family that you want them to let me come visit. And so out of 34 kids, I got to usually do about 32 home visits. They took about a half an hour each, and it was a lot of my own time, and I didn't care. And I had to spend my own money, and I brought them a gift. I also told them that I was going to give them a book that they would love to read, a pencil box with pencils and pens and erasers and sharpeners and that. And they couldn't get that unless they'd had the visit. And then, by the way, for the kids that didn't in the coming years, I gave it to them anyways afterwards. But it was my incentive. And then when I got to the parents' house, and they were so nervous, and there were times when we had to sit on the front porch because there were cockroaches raining down from the inside of the house. It's a very low socioeconomic area. But I would ask the parents, what are your goals and dreams for your child?
What were the reactions?
They would pour their hearts out.
Oh.
Because every parent loves their child. Every single parent. Some parents are ill-equipped to handle the rigors of raising up a kid, but every single parent, no matter how they're showing it at the time, loves their child. And then after I listened to them, then I would just say, how can I help? And we became partners. And let me tell you something, that solved all the behavior issues in my classroom that year and every year thereafter. I didn't have them because those kids knew that they were going to be murdered by their parents when they got home. And I did ask them, was it okay if I bring your child home if they've done something good or if they've done something that they shouldn't have done, so that we can just talk in person? Because I know that telephones go out, sometimes the battery is discharged or whatever it was, or, sometimes, because some of the parents were functionally illiterate, they couldn't read a note, the kid wasn't going to bring the note, so I didn't say it that way. I just said sometimes notes don't actually end up at home and so forth. And they all agreed, yes, 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 and they all said yes. And so I got it in writing that it was okay. Now, I did put $1 million liability coverage on my, on myself in the car, and because I was transporting students. Probably against the will of the school district, but I decided that I would ask for forgiveness later.
Another great lesson that I learned from you.
But it worked, and it worked out beautifully well. Nothing ever happened. And I have a student who is a Facebook friend, and with permission, I'm sharing this. He did an amazing job. He was the first student in the class to master all of his multiplication tables. And although that sounds minor, man, that is huge. And I drove him home, and when his mother opened the door and she saw that I was standing there with him, she shouted, "Lamont, you're dead." And I said, "Wait, it's a good visit." She goes, "What?" I said, "I had something so important to share with you that I brought him home." And her face completely changed, and she burst out into tears. Of course, I cry at the drop of a hat. I burst out into tears. We went in and we sat down, and I told her, and she hugged him, the longest hug. And he was so proud, right? Anyways, he came to school the next day and said, "She bought me a bike."
Oh my goodness. And that's just contagious, Anytime anytime that happens for one kid, all the other kids are working hard to have
They want
to
it.
achieve the same thing.
Sure. And then, so that's how I got the parents involved. And then how I picked off the children who were having deep emotional problems was I lined them up every single morning outside the classroom, and I shook their hand and I looked them right in the eyes, and they had to say good morning to me first, and then I said good morning back. And what I was doing was getting a read on them. I was figuring out, it wasn't just the social and emotional skill of good morning. It was, how are you feeling today? Because if they gave me a bright and cheery good morning and they looked okay, then I could be, okay, this student is going to be okay today. But if they were a little downcast, or if I felt something was off, that meant that I could go into the classroom prepared. And because I have a really short attention span, I would jot down the second I got there. I said, okay, I'm getting ready to do roll. They didn't understand that I was jotting down the 5 or 6 names of kids who were going to need some attention from me. And then I began doing the roll. So they never knew what I was really doing, but that was the point of it, is to get a read. And by the way, it does not matter if we're talking about children, or we can do that with adults too. We can get a read on somebody with just maybe some physical contact if we're face to face. And in an online world, there have been times when I have had to say to people, look, I want to talk to you on the phone just for a few minutes, super nice. I don't bite, I'm not mean, but I need you to hear my voice.
Yeah.
And I need to hear your voice, because then I can start to process and get that through, figure out how I can help that person.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I'm so grateful for technology right now, like Zoom, for years. I witnessed the power working with you and took it further as far as being able to work with people back and forth,
right?
Mostly in written, sometimes over the phone. But I'm telling you, the last retreat that I did where I used Zoom and I had all of these people connected and I could pull up their documents and show them the changes that I was making and explain in the moment. Oh my God, some of them wrote like 5 or 6 chapters in 3 days.
Right?
I mean,
yeah, it opens up the floodgates, doesn't it?
It really does. And it is because there's something you have to be really masterful with the written language to make the connection without a voice or eye contact, yes. Right? I mean, you have to really work hard to get that into content. But the voice fills in so many of the gaps.
Yes.
You hear so much more. I think that's one of the reasons why people really struggle going from a position of teaching or speaking and facilitating to getting onto the written page what they're trying to communicate, because they're not getting any feedback.
It's affect. Right? There's it's like because I've had to learn in my online self when I'm writing how to create a powerful voice that that still portrays energy. And a lot of people don't understand that in their writing, if it's just what their initial thoughts and it's down, it might have emotion, but if it doesn't have energy, it's not going to connect with the reader. So one has to develop this bouncy, perky sort of.
So voice. Give an example of that, because I love that. I know what it's like to receive both, but I'd love for you to give an example.
Okay, so just in terms of writing back to a student, I will say things like, I always validate their question. I am so glad you asked me that. That was an important question. And then I make sure that I reread what I've written to them and make sure that I remove any negative words and I switch them to positive forms. So instead of saying, like, you failed at that, I'll change it to something like, one great way to improve in this area is to blank, right? But if I'm writing, for example, in a nonfiction book, myself, if I'm writing something, or a fiction book, I still go back through and I make sure that my vocabulary is appropriate for the audience, that I use phrases in there. And even when addressing a difficult topic or something that's emotional or that's supposed to evoke tears, because there are things that do, I thought that I had unplugged that. I have now undone that. I wonder if it's ringing through my husband's computer. I literally, I want to show you something. The phone is unplugged. That is bizarre. It's sort of like it's alive. Okay, that's just bizarre. I've never not unplugged a phone and had it ring. Maybe it was Jesus, and if it is, he'll call me another way. He's capable. Anyways, redirect me. I've just lost my train of thought. My ADHD.
We were talking. I was asking you for examples about how do you bring that level of energy into your writing to your students.
Yeah. So there you go. Even in something, if somebody out there is writing something that has an emotional thing, then put all of that energy into it. Don't handle it dispassionately then. If it's something, you know, make sure that the words are chosen so carefully that the beautiful descriptive terms are there to help evoke that emotion out of the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. I remember watching you teach fourth graders how to write a story, and it was just so fun. I just remember watching them like, you know, how does this feel in your body when you feel like this? And what are the descriptors? And oh my goodness, it is so fun to do that. So what about the administration? You know, I have a lot of clients who are in education right now, and they're like, they've got these dreams of being able to change the game. And of course, teachers have a lot of the power there, but they're working kind of underneath these difficult systems.
Situations.
So how, like, what was your experience with that? How did you navigate that mindfully?
That's a really good question. It really is. First of all, I stayed positive in front of the administrator. I learned not to complain. I did have one situation where I did something probably inappropriately, but it did work out. We had cockroaches in my classroom that were really, really bad, big ones, and lots of them. And I went and I asked if our room could be, you know, sprayed over the weekend so that it could dissipate and we wouldn't poison the children. And they said no. They didn't want to do that. And I said, well, is there anything that we can do? Is there anything? Because really, we're talking about a lot. We've named some, okay? And by the way, I'm actually not kidding. We named some, and you know, and it's unclean and it's distracting. And also, I kept food in my classroom well sealed in sealed containers, but I didn't want them to be able to somehow get there because, you know, we had children that were hungry, and if a student had a headache, first I sent them to the restroom, and second I gave them water, and if they still had a headache, then I gave them food. Mm-hmm. Because it's usually one of those three things. And the fourth one was, if it still didn't go away, then I had a corner where they could go and take a nap. Mm-hmm. Because maybe they were up all night and they didn't share with me what had just happened. So, you know, those steps. Okay, but it doesn't work when there's cockroaches crawling on you. It just doesn't work. Anyways, they did nothing, and I waited a week and a half, and I got tired of it, so I told the kids that we were going to scoop up cockroaches, and I put them all in into a jar, and I put them on the principal's desk. Now, I said to her, I said, I'm just letting you know, this jar is closed, it's sealed. I said, my temper makes me want to unscrew the lid, but I'm not going to. I'm just letting you know, here's the evidence of the cockroaches, and by heavens, it was sprayed by the morning. That classroom was fine after that, right? So sometimes we have to handle something with a sense of humor or in a creative way.
Yeah.
The other thing with dealing with administration is they really do, most administrators really do want the best for their teachers and their students. They just are busy and frazzled and are freaking out and have all sorts of pressures and different ways of handling things, different ways of learning, and so forth. So when we understand that about them, that they're a human being and that they really do want the best, we can come up with the solution first. When teachers just go and whine and complaining, this isn't working, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. Mm-hmm. We had a time in my classroom where we were required to do 1 hour of English language development from 2:30 to 3:30 every single afternoon. Well, that was my time for science and social studies. And I didn't have any other time for it in my schedule. So instead of lying, because my entire day was English language development. I had the highest test scores in the district, so it wasn't like they didn't know I couldn't produce what I was doing, right? Mm-hmm. So, but they said that it had to be in our lesson plans, that we were doing an hour of English language development at that time. And I needed to solve it. I didn't want to do anything dishonest, illegal, or immoral. It's not right. So what I did was I broke down my, oh, and by the way, they wanted the other kids that weren't identified as ELL students, English language learner students. They wanted the non-identified students to be doing worksheets at their desk, worksheets for an hour. While I pulled only the kids that were identified, and I was supposed to do horrible flashcards that were below their level that they had given me. I was supposed to hold up pictures of a boat and say, what is this? It was ineffective. It wasn't going to work. I didn't want to get rid of science and social studies, which is English language development. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I broke apart my science and social studies lessons, and I made an entire plan of them, and I highlighted all the English language development in each.
Nice.
And then I took a lesson plan that said English language development listed on it, and I took my lesson plans that had the social studies and science that showed the English language development, and I took it to the principal and I said, would this be appropriate for me to leave this lesson plan stating English language development on the desk while I am doing this English language development that is listed here, but it just so happens that it's for every student in the class because there are many students who are not identified, including kids who were born in families that were English only, but that had a cultural aspect to it so that they didn't understand an academic sounding English. Mm. And she looked at it, she smiled, she high-fived me, and she said, yep, that's gonna work. Sometimes we just need to think of the creative solution that's still going to get the support of the administration. Yeah. And that worked, so, you know. And it saved my integrity because I didn't want to be doing something, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the main thing, right? Is when you're working inside of a system that doesn't feel good and requires you to do things like it doesn't feel good to do what they're asking me, and it doesn't feel good to do what I want to do because they're asking me.
Right.
How do you
yes.
negotiate that?
And it takes time to figure it out. There was a situation that didn't work out that way, and they didn't want us to tell the parents when their students needed to be tested for special education. And if I had a student that was already in 4th grade that had a smacking learning disability, and I was not allowed by the school district to tell them, I had to tell the parents anyways, because I would have rather lost my job and done what was right for the student who had to live their life in their future and become successful than ignore something that was absolutely critical.
Yeah.
And every single student that was ever tested that I had told the parents, you need to write a letter to the school district saying, I ask, comma, no, I demand that my child be tested to see if he or she has learning disabilities. Every student had diagnosed learning disabilities. I was correct, I wasn't incorrect. So in that way, I went around what the district was telling me to do.
Yeah. What was I mean, have you ever had a moment where you're just like, I don't know if there's a solution here? I mean, because you come up with some really good ones, but like.
Okay. Yes, I know what you're asking. Is there ever a time when we're completely stymied? Well, of course. Yeah. There's obstacles that are really difficult. However, have you ever done this when you start to think on it and you're not coming up with a solution? And of course, we're prayerful. I mean, I pray and I ask for wisdom. The Bible says God gives it to anyone, to all who asks of it. And that means literally anyone, whether they believe or not. If they ask God for wisdom, he's going to give it to them. And the other thing is I would plug it into my mind at night and go to sleep. And in the morning, 9 times out of 10, I would wake up with an answer. And in that 1 out of 10 time when I didn't, I would just keep plugging it in and thinking on it. My father, your dad was the most creative person ever, great with memory, as your audience may know. Your father was a guru in memory. And my father was a guru of creativity. And he taught us that creativity was not looking at something from point A to point B like everybody else does, but examining it in a three-dimensional fashion from point C and D and E and F and G, and looking at it in different perspectives and turning it around. And sometimes breaking that thing that we're examining in half, or into fourths, or into eighths, because he said, maybe we've bitten off too big of a chunk, and we have to back it up and look at it differently that way. And so I would break things down into smaller and smaller and smaller elements, and I would look at them differently until all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, duh, okay, got this, right? Okay, this one I can do. He used to also at the dinner table say to us, at least once a month, my entire growing up years, quick, how do you eat an elephant? And that answer is one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're looking at that elephant going, I can't do this. It's not going to happen. We didn't break it down into its smallest components.
Yeah, absolutely true. So you're like an amazing educator who's helping other people become phenomenal educators. And you also have this mad, speaking of creativity, you have this mad creative side where you're like always thinking about new stories and books that you want to write. And so how does that work for you? When did you first get inspired to write for yourself, fiction or nonfiction?
Oddly, on my 30th birthday, I had my very first, I don't drink, I'm a non-drinker, and I had one glass of champagne on my 30th birthday. And that night I sat straight up in bed and went, oh, I have an idea. And I went to keeping in mind, I just turned 55. So this was 25 years ago. And think of what computers were like 25 years ago. They had black screens with orange writing. And I logged up the computer, which meant I waited 15 minutes or maybe 20 for it to come up. And I began writing out this book. And I was so obsessed with it, I completely ignored my children. I mean to tell you, they raised themselves for a little while. It was really hard. I've learned balance, okay? I learned balance. But once Kristen actually brought me the phone, and she was little. And she said, Mommy, someone wants to talk with you. And I answered the phone, and it was 911. They'd been playing on the phone, and they had called 911. That was the day I learned. I finally, that was the day I learned something, which was right after they're asleep. So I would put them to bed, and then I would start writing. But that's when I wrote my first novel. And I liked that one so much, I did another, and then another, and another. I wrote 7 novels that I've never sold because I just, first of all, I can't even find them anymore because they were on those weird little floppy disks. But that's okay. It was all learning. I'm sure the first one was horrendous, but I learned. I learned from the process. And then it went from there. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously creativity is in your bones. You have an absolute mastery of the English language. So for you, were there any places where you felt like you would get hiccups inside of the writing of fiction? I've never written fiction. I'm terrified of it. Because
it's time. It's time. Be prepared. Amanda will have a new fiction book coming out within the year. I'm moving my cat who just decided to sit on me. Okay. Repeated words. I would go back and look at it and go, did I really say that word? I get hooked on a word and then I just use it 20 times in the same page. And so I have a rule of thumb that I use for myself, which is I can't use any word other than the, of it, other than a preposition or, conjunction. I can't use those words again on the same page. And I alert myself if I see it even 3 times in 10 pages. It's an alert. It's a red hot flag. So that was one of the big ones. And then the other one is I am in my ADHD style self, me. I change characters as I'm writing, and so their eyes leap from brown to blue or blue to brown. Their hair gets long or their hair gets short, or they're tanner or they're not tan, or they're, so I have to go through and comb through and make sure that I have it all not confusing. I don't want to send that wrong image and then change the image.
Right.
It's like you picture Cinderella wearing the blue dress and suddenly it's pink. What? So yeah. Everybody who writes has struggles. There's not a single one of us who write we craft our work through just hard work and practice.
Yeah.
And this being dedicated to that process.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why I writing nonfiction itself is so creative, because you give it structure and then you get into the writing, and then the book tells you, like, no, you missed a part, or you need to add this. And
right.
And so the thought of just following a character is like, wow, that seems really overwhelming, but probably.
I'm going to tell you something, Amanda. I don't mean to be weird about this. I am a Christian woman, but at a certain point you're channeling, and that character takes over and it speaks to you, and you're just, all you're shouting is, I'm possessed, as you're writing the book, and this stuff is just pouring out. It happens.
Yeah.
Just at a certain point, your mind has already figured it all out, and it's just gushing out. And getting into that zone is brilliant and fun. It's just, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of fiction. It doesn't happen in the same way with nonfiction. It's not, nonfiction is a whole different animal, but with fiction, if you've done a good enough job of figuring out where they're going and you begin, that ending might not be the ending that you had initially envisioned.
Has that happened to you?
Every time. every single time.
I love it.
Every time. Yeah. It always surprises me. I'm like, okay. Whoa.
Oh my goodness. So when you are working with other educators and other writers, because I know that you have a collection of people around you who are creative, including your amazing husband, who's written how many novels now?
He has six published novels, and a contract for the next 2. And we're working on a series together.
Oh,
I'm so excited. We have the whole thing plotted. It's going to start with 5 books, and we're not going to begin writing it together until we get to East Texas. We're moving from California. And when we're both there together in our newly renovated farmhouse, like day 2 of moving in, we're starting on it. It's called Killers Club.
Oh my goodness.
5 people from East Texas who all have a connection to a small airport. It's called the Bacon Love Airport. And it's a quirky little airport that has this beautiful cafe that everybody goes to. It's really popular. And these 5 people have they all have secrets, and I'm not telling them here, but they get together and they decide to solve a cold case murder of one of their good friends who was murdered. And in book after book, they solve cold cases of murders.
Wow.
And so it's the story of the shenanigans they get into, and the relationships they share, and the secrets that end up getting revealed about them as they go.
Wow.
Can't wait to do it.
So so I'm always like, logistically, how does that work? Because this last year, I've had a few people contact me and say, I want to write this book with my husband because they lost a child, and so they want to write it from 2 perspectives, or a health crisis or something. And a lot of what ends up being in the books feels like fiction. It's because of how it's told through the story, but the perspectives and everything. So how does that work for you guys? Like, what do you imagine that looking like, writing together? Who's doing this?
So ask me next year, but here's how it's going to probably go. I will say this with all honesty, my husband is a far, far better writer than I am. I am an accomplished writer. I am decently skilled. He's brilliant. He is beyond talented. He is Shakespeare living today, and I am not kidding. His book, By the Hands of Men, book 1, The Old World, was given a 5-star review by the British Historical Society as the best historical fiction written in the year it came out. I mean, he is unbelievable, and that was his first book. Each one thereafter has gotten better. He can craft a sentence like nobody's business. Now, I'm just barfing, get it on the page, and he'll craft and make it luscious. So it's likely that I'm going to barf it and he's going to craft it.
Yeah.
That's likely. And we're also probably going to, he has me doing all of the research on the cold cases that they're going to be doing. Mind you, we've made them all up. They're not real cold cases.
Right.
But he has me doing that whole aspect. I'm handling the plotting of it, and he'll handle the writing, and then I always edit. He's not a careful editor, and you know me. Oh my gosh, don't put a comma in the wrong place near me, right?
Yeah.
So I'll be editing it. So I'll be doing the research. We've worked on the characters together. We have them all mapped out already. We go places together. We'll be doing all the site-based things together as trips, which is fun.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Right? You know, we're going to take our characters all over Texas and Louisiana and different places. You know, it's going to be fun.
That sounds like a blast, and what an amazing team. The dynamic.
We'll see. We don't know. I mean, we really like each other now. Things could change.
Oh my goodness. So that sounds like, it sounds like an adventure, at least. Really.
I can't wait. We're planning on doing, like, we'll probably put out a book every 2 months.
I know. And that's the other thing. You guys are wicked fast.
He's not wicked fast. He's not wicked fast. I'm wicked fast.
You're wicked fast.
He's not. I'm the gatekeeper, man. I'm like the shove it guy. You're right. You know, and he'll take a year.
Yeah.
Then again, he'll write a 600-page book or
right.
book, and you know.
But there's something, I think there's something about that type of partnership. I mean, that's what happens with my authors too, is, you know, when you know that you have someone in your corner who's going to go through and make it even more powerful and make sure that you don't miss anything or opportunities in the writing, it's easier to get out those crappy rough drafts, right? Because you're just like, I just gotta get it out there, and then I know that so-and-so is going to help me polish it and take it to the next level. And that process just adds so much velocity to the experience.
The other reason, though, why his takes time is because since it's historical fiction, the history has to be accurate, and he does unbelievable gobbles of extensive research. Pure fiction, when you're just making it up,
right?
Woo! Have a nice day. You know, it doesn't matter. But in his case, his first book set in World War I. Wow. On the battlefields of France is where it begins. He had to know what was really happening. Which is why the British Historical Society said, whoa, you know, amazing. Because of that. Because he had it absolutely correct. And he has also purchased books that were written in that time period, shipped to him. Because he has this one section on zoology in there. Well, he couldn't put modern day notions of zoology. So he actually found a guy who wrote a book in South Africa where a section of his book was set that was a veterinarian, and he dealt with big giant wild animals. And so Griff bought, and he'd long died, but Griff contacted his son.
Wow.
And got a copy of the book. So, right? But we don't have to do that with Killers Club.
Well, and, you know, I mean, just thinking about all the people that I've met and the creatives, like usually, I mean, that's a very balanced brain there. To be able to do that level of research in that way, and then that creative to craft something, it's like, wow, I understand the word brilliant.
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, I don't have that in me. But what I do have to do is get very, very skilled, not on what we've seen on crime television shows, but actually skilled when I have to educate myself on, because I'm in charge of this section, is how do we really solve a cold case in a murder? Because I don't want to have a whole bunch of implausible, stupid oops in there, right? I don't want a knowledgeable reader to shut the book and say, seriously, Mickey Mouse did not give the final clue.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so fun. So fun. So, you know, when we're doing anything creative, whether it's teaching or writing books, you know, there's always this, like you were talking about earlier, how you kind of ignored your children for a little while. There's this thing that is really important to me called mindfulness, because it is so easy to become possessed
It
by
is. Yes.
an inspiration. It doesn't have to even be a character. It's just like, for me, it was this vision of what I could do in the world. And, you know, like everything else disappears. And so I've had to practice a lot of mindfulness and figure out practices for me that kind of keep me anchored into my center
Right.
so that I don't lose touch. I mean, there are times for it, right? When I had to write a book in 3 weeks to meet a deadline, I told my husband and son, like, you're cooking dinner, I'm going to kiss you goodnight.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I might use the restroom once in a while. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on a regular basis, what do you do as part of your practice of staying in your center?
Okay. So I've kind of done a lot of thinking about this over the years, a lot. And I really think that people can only handle 3 things well at a time. And we can do up to 5 for a sprint, but not for a marathon. And if somebody has little kids at home, that is a full 1.
Yeah.
That is a full 1. If you're married, that is a full 2. And if you have a full-time job on top of that, you're full up, which means that you can only sprint on these other little things. If the kids are up and out like mine, that just gave me a full 1 back to me. So I have people that say, gosh, you do so much. Well, they're out. And by the way, just one aside, I did tell them that they would need years of therapy to get over me, so they better get a really good job because I wasn't going to pay for it. So just to let you know that. And to those of you who don't know me, my kids actually all turned out really well and they're amazing human beings. So thank heaven. Woo! But so for me, for example, all of my educational endeavors that I do, I teach. I'm an adjunct professor at 2 universities, and I teach an average of 3 classes at a time per semester. And that's and that plus my other job at Western Governors University combines to make a 40-hour job. So that's a 1. And then my husband and all of my activities that I do with my children, and traveling back and forth to see them, and making time to see my mom, and doing all of these personal things with real live human beings, my time with my friends, that's a 2. So that leaves me an X number of hours per week to do the creative things that I want to do. One of the things that I do that takes up a full 1 is I clean hoarders' houses. So I can't be doing any creative activity at the time when I'm working on somebody's house that really, really needs my help. And I don't do it for pay. I do that for free as service. But I'm in the process of moving. I don't have a hoarder's house right now. And guess what that moving takes up? It's a 1. We're renovating our farmhouse, and that takes up my other 1. So that's how come I cannot do Killer's Club now. That's why Griff and I said, okay, when that 1 is off the list, then I'm going to go and do Killer's Club with you, because it adds back in that time.
Yeah.
So, we can't bite off more than we can really chew, or we get the crazies and we're insane. We women, we cry, and not the happy tears. We become unglued.
Yeah.
And that's when we're like, I can't do this anymore, and nothing is working. And it's like all that hyperbole. No more hyperbole.
Yeah. Well, and I like, that's one of the things that I realized this year, because I started to do these momentum retreats, and it's basically like 3 days for people to tap in either virtually or in person to get away to work. It's those sprints, right?
Yes, it's a sprint, and it's great. That's great, and we can do those.
Yeah, and what I find is that people feel more sane in between, because it's like the message keeps driving them crazy, like knock, knock, the character's like, well,
what has to come out? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, give it a voice. It knocks, you write down the inspiration, but you tell it, I got you for February 7th through 9th. Don't worry about it. 3 days, just you and
you're going to barf out. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they feel a lot more sane in between, because now it's not like this, I need to be doing this and I can't figure out where to put it. It's scheduled. So I really appreciate that advice so much.
Well, and it's the other thing too. It's what other little things are we doing that suck up our time that we don't really need to be doing? It's not a matter of having to pay everybody to do stuff like clean our house and pay. I just live in a messy house. No, I don't. It's relatively messy. If someone's coming over, it'll get vacuumed.
Right.
But what can we cut out? I like physical activity. So I ride my bike with my husband on weekends, but I don't have the time to go to a gym during the week. So I use that. I do very physical things to get exercise in, but that also get stuff done. So all the yard work and the gardening and the raking and the hoeing and the lifting and the carrying and stuff, right? I get that all done. And that counts as exercise,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. There's people who don't realize that there's things that they can cut out. For example, computer games.
Or Facebook.
You'll notice that I'm really active on Facebook because I'm typative. I'm really talkative, and so I talk on Facebook a lot. But there are long periods of time when I'm absent because I'm working on something and I have to focus.
Yeah.
And then I'll join back in Facebook and I'm like, yay! And people don't seem to notice when you're not there. They're like, wow, she's really active. Yeah, you forgot those last 6 weeks, but
yeah.
So sometimes we can pare things down that are non-essentials, or set a goal to say, I'm going to work on this for 1 hour and then I'm going to reward myself with 10 minutes, and by heavens, I'm going to time it, and then I'm getting back to it.
Yeah.
Because that keeps us from getting so scattered that we don't get anything done.
Yeah. Or time of day. I think that's one of the things, when I was working Right Well, I was kind of like around the kids' sleep schedule, right? So
and he was little.
Yeah, that's just around that schedule. But when I have my day to myself and I'm not needed here and there and everywhere, it's like my best time of day for creativity is in the morning. So if I find myself on Facebook, it is like goodbye the rest of my day. It zaps all of that creativity. Right. So organizing the day like that around my energy really seems to help.
Yes, and for me, because when I'm in Texas, I'll be there next week, and I'm going to be doing physical labor, and it has to be done during the daylight, right? So I'll be putting in, 6 to 7 hours a day, 6 days a week at the farmhouse getting it done. But I still have full-time work. So I go back to the other house. We have a lake house that we're living in until then. And as soon as I get home, I take a shower. I eat something proteiny. I take green tea CR to up my brain capacity. And then I focus and I work until I work from 5 p.m. till midnight. And so when I tell myself it's 5 till midnight, that's my time.
Yeah.
It's just being really, really self-controlled, self-directed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom and all of your ideas with me and this audience. And I have a few rapid fire questions for you to conclude.
Good luck. Okay.
Oh, it was amazing. That's amazing. I love it. Thank you. Because, we're all about books and messages. What was the first book or message that changed your life?
Quantum Teaching for the Classroom. It's a book by Bobby DePorter and a whole bunch of other people, and it's amazing. It's about how the methods and techniques that we can use to reach a child and to open up their brain and unlock it. I would recommend anyone read that. She also has Quantum Learning out as well, which teaches us how to learn. Great books.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a teacher. If you're a parent.
Oh, no.
If you're a parent, read the book.
Read the book.
You got to teach your kids.
Even if you're not a parent, just read the book. Just get it on Amazon. It's, just get the book.
What is your favorite book and why?
In the whole world? I would say the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
It has the entire Christian message in it, and I didn't know that when I read it when I was in 4th grade, but it's my favorite book ever.
Yeah, it's so epic. Who is your favorite messenger and why?
And Bobby DePorter for that same reason, because she gave me the keys to unlock it. There's so many people I could list, 150, but she's really amazing.
Yeah. And how can our audience connect with you and find out more about the books that you've written and the books that your husband's written, since you talked about that and this wonderful process that you guys are in together?
Thankfully, our last name is unusual. It's Griffis, like Sam Griffis. And he's Roy M. Griffis, and he's on Amazon.com. I'm on Amazon.com. And I'm on Facebook, I'm Alisa Johnson Griffis. And anyone can connect with me. Just let me know how you heard of me, because I actually don't accept friend requests from people who are sort of unwarranted. And if you're a male, you need to let me know you heard me through Amanda Johnson, otherwise forget it. Just because I get those weird male requests, I'm like, no, delete, But I have a lot of Facebook friends, and I'd love to have you too.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for the amazing role that you have played in my life and your friendship, and for joining me on this show. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome, and it was a pleasure.
We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.